Hi guys, it's Stevie. After literally 5 years, I'm able to finally play Yu-Gi-Oh again, which is why for my first Premier tournament, I went X2-1 drop. What can I say, remote duel metagames are just insane. However, because I'm known as the lab guy, and in being said lab guy, a bunch of deliberation for my second Premier event back, I decided to go with Old Faithful and probably the deck I've had the most success on realistically, Labrynth. So why am I making this video? It's because I already paid Tsewten for the thumbnail and I can't really back out of this. I think this deck represents something inherent to what I enjoy about games, which is a lesser explored option within metagames, but do have uniquely clear strengths that allow me to curb stomp people into oblivion. In League, I one-tricked Master Yi, which was arguably the best hypercarry to have ever existed. In Uma Musume, it's making evil nature, and in Yu-Gi-Oh, it's harnessing the unrivaled power of purple cards. Secondly, I am also very proud of how I performed and played, as well as how I approached this deck when it came to its theory and its deck building, mostly. As you guys may be aware, I was actually banned for like 5 years, and although I did test and keep up with the game on a semi-regular level, the only format I really put major prep work into was Snake Eyes format, Mitsurugi Raizuo format, which was the last format, and this format. I was not really looking forward to this format specifically. I didn't like how Vanquish Soul, K9, Yummy, or Draco Tail played. And additionally, I am so sick of Mitsurugi Raizuo, and this deck is not going to exist within a month. Like, these cards are cool and powerful, but I can only get like Fuud, Peruliad, and Drolled so many times, or uninterruptedly hand loop someone with my Ouroboros before I think something might be wrong. Truth be told, honestly, I was fully prepared to quit Yu-Gi-Oh! At least for a long while and play Riftbound. By the way, it makes me so happy that Master Yi is like arguably the best deck in the metagame. But then after a bunch of discussions with my friends, I was able to get some quality testing, fill in the gaps in my knowledge, and then eventually transition their dreams into a top 4 finish at an OTS championship. Now I know what you might be thinking. Oh my god, we're watching a locals deck profile? Well yes, but it's different. This event was about 7 to 8 rounds, which is definitely a headache and a half to play through. I know regionals that have less rounds. Additionally, there were a lot of sweats and overall good players that attended the event. The Bay Area has a lot of local legends like Brian Chen, Craig Hayashi, and Michael Park, some of which were actually at this event. And outside of named topping players, there was also a high concentration of players who were just objectively pretty good to great at the game, with regional, YCS, and national accomplishments under the belt, so by no means was this like an Alaskan 5-person regional. So I'm going to try and break this video down into 4 parts. Why specifically Labrynth, the overall deck profile, why I didn't play certain cards, and my final thoughts on the deck. But before we get into that, I want to give a special shout out to the Cell Block G group chat, specifically Gavin, Yuli, and Annie. These 3 and the litter of people coming in and out of the admin calls were the most helpful resource I could have asked in terms of getting games in, bouncing ideas off, and generally just doing random bullshit with when I got bored of Yu-Gi-Oh!
Oh, there's hell! No, don't touch these, don't touch these. Chris, take the bag.
Oh!
I fucking told you!
I can pretty safely say I would not even know a quarter of what I currently know and understand about the format, and a lot of my success in terms of preparation is owed entirely to them. Now, onto Lab. So the big 5 decks in the format, at least at the time of recording, are K9 Vanquish Soul, Yummy, Raizuo Mitsurugi, and Malice. And like, if you want to pretend really hard, you can cope that Draco Tail exists within there. K9 Vanquish Soul, I had issues not only being able to effectively learn the deck in time at an optimal level, because that deck is so insanely complicated, but also the fact that it has horrible consistency issues. Like when you actually stop to look at like a Vanquish Soul K9 list, it becomes very apparent that you're playing to like 5 to 8 bricks or cards that you don't really want to open. Yummy I also felt was good, but was also a little too technically demanding for me to learn the deck in time, and was also one of those decks that felt like it folded to so many things out of the sideboard and to specific breakers in a way that I wasn't super comfortable with. Like, if you open a weak hand with Yummy and your opponent normal summons like a Fenrir, you just lose the game on the spot. Raizuo Mitsurugi I will stick to death of, and Malice, it's Malice. You know, you either set up 12 interrupts or you get Lancet and Cry. One thing these decks all had in common with each other was that they weren't actually that good into back row. Like, they did have some form of in-engine interrupt or disruption, but for the most part, they weren't really great at cracking boards that were kind of just like set 3 or set 4. All these decks additionally needed some core monster or have a monster specific choke point that, if capitalized on, collapse like immediately. An easy example with Malice is when they go into Splash Mage to revive their Dormouse. You can kind of just blow them out of the game on that specific choke point with like Daruma Cannon or Punishment, unless they open a second extender and try to go for a Lingaribo line to try and insulate them from trap cards. But going into Lovely Lab early off of like Big Welcome, just so that they can't chain the Lingaribo, does give you a lot of game versus them, since they'll be at over 5 summons, which puts the fear of God in them, since getting nibbed here does just kind of end their turn. Secondly, Lab has an amazing hand trap and side deck matchup. Yes, I am aware that Ash and Bell are both prevalent and creeping into side and main deck boards. Yes, I am aware of the existence of breakers like Lightning Storm and Evenly Matched. Yes, I am aware that every Bestial and DD Crow under the sun does make me want to fucking shoot myself. However, most people's main and sideboards, if they weren't on exactly like Yummy or Sky Striker, either lacked these cards entirely or needed to dedicate more slots for things such as the Mirror Match or another one of the big 4 decks. Like, if you look at the Paisley regional list or the EUWCQ like points playoff winning list, yes, I know Euros was pre-Justice Hunters, but bear with me. Most of these slots needed to be dedicated for things like blowout hand traps and specific floodgates and breakers. Do you really want to put points in the Labrynth / back row matchups just to get blown out by Yummy or K9? Sources say no. Alright, onto the deck profile. So this is the list. Fair warning, I'm not going to read to you what each card does, however I will be giving you the reasoning for why we played certain cards and why we played them at the ratios we did. Fair warning, some of the logic may be demented and unhinged, so please bear with that as well. So, we have our Labrynth engine. We've got 3 Ariana, 3 Chandelier, 3 Stevie, and 1 Kuklok. Fun fact, if you have a German core like I do, thanks Korean by the way, Kuklok says cuck, so that's funny. We max out on the first 3 because they get us to our engine, big surprise, but the furniture do pull double duty at triggering our honorary furniture, triple Absolute King Backjack. This card is one of the main reasons to be playing this deck. If it's sent to the graveyard, you can look at the top 3 cards of your deck and rearrange them in any order, then on your opponent's turn, as a quick effect, you can banish it from your graveyard and reveal the top card of your deck, and if it's a normal trap, you can set it and activate it that turn, otherwise it just goes to the graveyard. The synergy of turn 0 furniture pitch backjack to get both engine and potentially another power trap online is what makes this deck absolutely disgusting to play against, and is basically the equivalent of like Holly Sue raisoning someone. We're only playing 1 Kuklok because it does nothing by itself and it's searchable. Yes, you can play 3 if you really want to open Kuklok as a furniture, but oh my god, this card sucks. This card is poo-poo to open by itself. Honorary furniture, we have 3 Arias. We max out on her since being able to open her alongside a power trap for turn 0 plays, alongside turn 1 plays like being able to use your welcomes, does basically create unparalleled interruption and advantage, and we're able to dig for those specific combinations with our Charmies, which we'll get into a bit later. We are on 1 Lovely and 1 Lady. Both are insane, but do suck to open, so we're only playing them at 1. Next, we're on Labrynth. This card is pretty underrated, but it does feel unstoppable in certain game states. Being able to turn Small Welcome into an interrupt, and essentially the revive after something like a Daruma Cannon can turn this card into basically like a +4 on its own. And finally, we've got our welcomes. We've got 3 big welcome and 2 small welcome. We're only on 2 small welcome since it's like the worst welcome in the deck and it's pretty horrible to open in multiples. And even if we have one banished off of Trap Trick, for example, it can infinitely recycle itself, so we're never ever really losing it. So, onto our power spells. We were playing 3 Pot of Extravagance, the Alt Art because it's really cool, and the 1 Called by the Grave. Extrav is just Pot of Greed, of course, but Called by is arguably the best utility going first and second card in the format. It insulates your plays and can interrupt specific choke points on your opponent's turn or of your own turn. It's just an extremely high quality card overall. It just almost does everything. Onto the sack traps. We are on triple Daruma Cannon, without a doubt the best trap card in the format. Did you know this effect isn't even once per turn? This card almost single-handedly shatters any attempt for your opponent trying to OTK you or build any sort of board. During my Draco Tail matchup, I was able to kind of just stun them out from ever killing me by just lovely resetting Daruma or Lady setting Daruma from deck over and over and over and over again. Speaking of the best trap card, we have the second best trap card, which is Dominus Impulse. Yes, there are Nombos that exist with like our Charmies and our extra deck, which we'll get into later. No, it does not matter because this card just does everything in this deck. It's a normal trap, so it's settable. It destroys cards or it triggers our stuff. It's a hand trap, so we can do it turn 0. Speaking of turn 0 plays, we can also make the destruction live on turn 0 by going like Chain Link to Impulse to something like Normal Summon Ice Effect, and Chain Link 3 Furniture, pitch a trap card so that the trap card's engraved and the Impulse checks on Resolution to destroy. It's beautiful. This card is amazing. And finally, we have our last main deck, Sack Trap, Dogmatica Punishment. Now, I can already hear you thinking, Stevie, why are we playing both Impulse and Punishment? Why would we play a card that's reliant on our extra deck? First, it's the fact that it's probably the best trap at answering both Yummy and Vanquish Soul. The theory is with Vanquish Soul, if they summon Mad Love and they activate Start, we send the Entis as Chain Link 2 to pop both the Mad Love and the Start before it's like protected. Now, this does lose to an in-hand Burger or Caesar Salad, but if we have Lovely on board, they can't chain monster effects to it. Plus the odds of them opening that is like 40% tops, and sometimes you just have to take those risks in a deck like this. Secondly, when they summon Snatchy to place the field spell, you can just also do the Entis special where you pop the Snatchy, and because Snatchy is once per turn, they're either forced to burn a surprise, which opens them up to way more sack traps because they're down an extender just to get back their field spell. But if it does resolve and they don't have surprise or a way to get it back, they basically can't kill us for like the rest of the turn, and Lab can just infinitely go off. It does contest extremely well with weak normal summons in the format, since it does have the added value of sending something like a Garua to draw or a Birthmet to play through Bestials at a later point in time. And finally, to round up our trap lineup, we have Triple Trap Trick. This card is very frustrating to play with at times, since you want to sequence your traps in a specific way, and sometimes this deck does lock you out of your own cards because of you can only activate one trap card for the rest of the turn after the card resolves. But at the same time, this card is needed in order to raise your main deck count high enough, as well as act as like a piece of pseudo engine, because you can grab stuff like Welcome and Big Welcome. And finally, we've got 2 Perulia and 2 Fuolos. So why these demented ratios? I personally felt like playing 6 Charmies in the main was a little too ambitious, since it does cut into our consistency. Like, yes, we can maybe cut an extra up here, or cut a Labrynth there, or cut a Call by the Grave where, but it does ultimately eat into our going first power. I also don't want to play 45 cards in the main deck, since that dilutes our deck and backjack math enough, as well as the fact that our deck will just be Brick City at a certain point. However, hedging our bets versus the big 4 decks, since the format was so open, was the theory that we settled on for these ratios, at least for, you know, this specific deck. And overall, it personally felt fine in a deck like this. However, I do understand if you want to shave the main deck count to 40, or you only want to main board one of the 2 Charmies, or you want to like cut Call by the Grave and maybe like another card to go down to like 41 if you still want to fit stuff. I completely understand. Onto the extra deck, we have way more simple explanations here. We've got Triple Chaos Angel, it's broken. We have Triple Muckracker, we've got Fiends we want to revive. We've got Relinquish Anima. This card says send Backjack to the graveyard turn 1. We've got Double Bagushka. This is mainly for Ryziel and Vanquish Soul. Triple Typhon. Did you know that this card's a Fiend? You can like bounce it with Big Welcome and trigger all your furnitures and welcomes. So, like, you will do that a lot. It is a very common play. And our punishment package, which is as slim as it could possibly be. We've got 1 Entis, 1 Garua, and 1 Baphomet. Now, the side deck is definitely something. We've got Perulia and Fuolos to both 3. We've got Triple Phantasme, and triple Rescue Ace Impulse alongside the quintessential Fire Attacker as our deep draw engine. Now, these three specific cards are not very good. However, in our deck where our primary form of interruption exists solely to blow out our opponent with 2 to 3 card furniture / aria / backjack combos, these do technically get us to those cards more efficiently than anything else, better than Meowls even. It's basically mission critical for turn zeroing our opponent to sculpt our hand and graveyard as best as possible, and this was absolutely the correct call, especially if the impulse package. More than once, I would just like Fire Attacker and it would just draw me some cards. It would draw me pieces of like Arias plus a sack trap or like maybe like furnitures, and I would pitch a backjack and that would trigger the backjack, and I would just insulate this massive Congo line of like advantage and disruption that my opponent would be like, what the fuck is happening? I mean, like, I thought this was a trap deck. Psych loser, it was a fucking combo deck the whole time. Next up, we've got Ardeane. This card is mainly for OTK lines going first and being able to make Bagushka. Moving forward, I think her job would be much better fulfilled by like almost anything else, so I am going to be cutting her. Speaking of cuttable cards, we have Labrynth setup. This is the worst card in the deck. Yes, there is the Arias into set Trap Trick, into activate Welcome, into summon Ariana, grab Labrynth setup, activate the setup, and then shuffle back to 2 Welcomes, and then like you get to set your sack traps. Like, yes, that is a play, but I think that in this format it's both a little too slow and way to win more, which is the big thing. So I will definitely be cutting this as well. Finally, we're on to D Barrier, just to give people a headache, and 2 different Dimension Ground, which was specifically for Crystron K9, which I was absolutely terrified of, but also just hits random rogue decks like Memento. Now, onto the list of cards we didn't play. Here's a relatively brief overview of everything we decided not to play. Obviously, explanations are going to be a little bit kind of all over the place, but doesn't really matter. So, Terrors of the Overroot was in contention with Dogmatica Punishment, but unfortunately was like a little too conditional versus Vanquish Soul. Like, you can't really do it on the normal summon the same way you can with like Dogmatica Punishment of like Mad Love, so I decided to ultimately choose Punishment over this. Next we have Trapaholic. This card is just, unfortunately, it's too slow. I would rather keep playing setup. That's how slow this card is. The problem is with Trapaholic is not only does it not do anything on its own, but we also don't have any real synergies with graveyard traps, since we're not playing like Paleos or transaction rollbacks, so we're not even getting any like real turn 0 value off of it for whatever we're going to be like milling or popping or whatever. Maybe in the future this card is going to be a lot better, but with the way Lab and the format is currently shaped right now, I definitely am not the biggest fan of this card right now. Speaking of graveyard traps, we have Transaction Rollback. This card is like fine. It's very, very weird to describe this card. In a deck like Lab, it seems like because, you know, you have like a bunch of furniture pitches, you're like, it makes very much sense to conceptualize, oh my god, I can roll back. Even if I get ashed, I can like big welcome. I can, because you know, you can copy the effect of rollback, or you can do like A, B, C, D. You can do a bunch of plays. There are like a million things you can do with transaction rollback that are very, very powerful. I'm not denying that it's bad. However, not only did I feel like it was kind of too slow and kind of sacky, but also because I was fully of the mindset that nobody would be on Lightning Storm or Duster, which is for the reasons I mentioned earlier, which was for the most part correct, because half the time you're going to be using rollback as like a set off of Trap Trick, so that you could like set rollback off the Trap Trick after you get like Dustered, and then you could use like one of the rollback that was set onto your field and then immediately popped afterwards in order to, like, you know, do some plays in your opponent's turn. Like, you could re-trigger Trap Trick, you could re-trigger like a Daruba cannon that got popped, you could re-trigger 10 billion cards. You guys get the idea. On to side deck choices. Bystials were in the thought process, since it does help out with Mitsurugi, but that's not a matchup I'm super scared of. But if I did have the space, I would definitely try and fit them in, because oh my god, these cards are broken, and also they're level 6 darks, so shout out to Chaos Angel. Evenly was a card we were thinking about, but it was only really good if you were able to set up like a real push in terms of a combo deck. Like this card is only really good in decks where you're able to like break your opponent's board and then you're able to contest with whatever like hand traps or turn 0 stuff that they have in their hand. It's kind of like why we don't play Dark Ruler, but we just can't really capitalize off of using these kinds of breakers with a deck like ours, especially since we still have to contest with things like Holly Sue and Ash Blossom in hand. Mutually Offered Destruction is a card I genuinely considered for playing. Shout out to Jason for telling me about this card and lending it to me because I was like testing it for a little bit, but unfortunately I just couldn't find the space for it. I felt that overboarding for VS K9 just wasn't the best idea. It's also a normal trap, which is very, very funny. We got Droll, Lancia, Chaos Hunter. They are all in here and they were all cut in contention for the same reason we cut evenly. We just can't really capitalize off of stunning our opponent really well since we're just gonna like set 5 pass anyways. But also, I made another meta call that not a lot of Malice would be played at this event, and that I shouldn't really respect it since our active like hand trap lineup is just overall better than trying to like stun our opponent out. That I feel like cutting these cards is just completely fine in the sake of more synergy. However, if I were to play one of these, I would definitely play Chaos Hunter, just because Chaos Hunter can fetch Backjack, which is really, really funny. The viruses are really, really weird. I really wanted to play them, but unfortunately the format is so open that there's just too much diversity in regarding to decks in the format. I might experiment with them in the future, but unfortunately they just didn't make the final cut. If I had to make like a little internalized tier list, it would be like full force virus at the top, since it basically hits almost everything outside of certain like Vanquish Soul names that can kind of go crazy. Crush Card Virus, since this card basically FTK's Vanquish Soul outside of like exactly Mad Love. Deck Devastation Virus, since it's just a worse full force virus. And Eradicator. I really wanted to play this card. Not a lot of decks are as spell-centric as like Striker or Yummy, so I ultimately like just cut this card. Like, cool, it's a cool sack trap, and like, yeah, I lost my finals match because my mental opponent opened like 5 spells plus like Dark Blade, like good for them. At the same time, I just feel like this card is just not very good unless you're in a very, very specific format like Kashtira format or like a random tier 0 striker format. Fenrir was the card closest being on the final list, but after a bunch of testing I made the decision to cut it. In theory, it does everything for us. It gives us advantage. It gives us more game versus turn 0 Vanquish Soul K9 and more play versus Yummy, and is a great card overall. It's a great breaker too. Unfortunately, the Nombo with Dominus Impulse is frustrating enough that since these games do go on for an extended amount of turns because we're playing a trap deck, Fenrir can turn itself from like a win con in itself to a slightly bigger Cyber Dragon, which isn't bad, but it was frustrating enough to warrant a final cut. I might still experiment with this for the future, but I'm definitely pretty iffy on it. And lastly, Goes in match. It was like, okay. Alright, on to our final thoughts. Overall, I had a great time at being able to play Yu-Gi-Oh! At the Premier level again, especially with my favorite deck, and finally re-earn my invite and not have to stress about this for the rest of the season with my favorite deck. It's almost poetic in a sense. I can't wait to see you all at the Santa Clara Regional and YCS Vancouver and YCS Anaheim. Please don't be afraid to say hi to me at events. I'm finally allowed to like be on premises now. Let me know what your thoughts are on the deck, and I will see you all next time.